So, for our first trip on episode 49, we head to South America, but more importantly, we head to Sao Paulo in Brazil. And I'm really pleased to have alongside with me for episode 49 a good friend who we finally actually get to speak face to face in an internet sense, but we've worked together for on the Stock Car Pro series for Motorsport.tv. Carlos Costa joins me. Carlos, good to see you, my friend. Firstly, belated Happy New Year wishes. Of course, we're right in the throes of the middle of January at the moment whilst recording this, but how are things over in Sao Paulo? And good to see you finally.
Hi, Alex. Very big pleasure to be here in the podcast. As you said, meeting face to face for the first time. We had a couple of experiences with stock car, but only with the voice. It's nice to see the face behind the person. Happy New Year. And so far, so good in Brazil. Of course, summer here in Sao Paulo, a lot of rains, a difficult situation when we have energy issues and so on. But happily in my house, it's not such a big problem. And now we have a good opportunity to look to the season that will come, 2024 season, not just in Stock Car Pro Series, but other racing series in Brazil. And I believe that we are in a very good moment in our country after such difficult 2020 because of the pandemic and so on, but now rebuilding and in a good momentum as a whole, not just in the stock car, but other racing series such as NASCAR Brazil, Porsche Cup Brazil, apart from the Formula One Grand Prix that is already a traditional uh, event in Formula One. So a lot to talk about, Alex.
Yeah, indeed. For those that don't know, Carlos is one of the network editors at Motorsport.com Brazil, but also not only commentates alongside myself, Jake Sanson, Tom Gamel, Bryn Lucas, Chris McCarthy on the Stock Car Pro Series, but you're also one of the voices for Porsche Cup Brazil, where we've seen quite a few drivers get through that series. We've seen Enzo Elias. Also, quite recently, towards the end of 2023, we saw all three of the Barrichello family. That was Fefu, Dudu, and also Rubinho, competing at I think it was the 500 kilometers of Interlagos, which was like the season finale, if I remember correctly, for Porsche Cup Brazil. But then, of course, Gabriel Casagrande from Matthias Vogel became a two-time Stock Car Pro Series champion. I mean, the funny thing was, folks, I was watching on Motorsport.tv on my smartphone, listening to Carlos and Jake talking through what was, I think, one of the weirdest ways to end the final race of the season with the whole safety car debacle, which I think caught a lot of people out. And from your perspective, Carlos, as not only a journalist but as a commentator, it was quite an interesting affair that Gabriel Casagrande knew that he was in the right place at the right time. Daniel Serra was trying to look to go for his fourth title. And it just came under this big cloud, didn't it, with the safety car problems? Just talk about it from your perspective.
Yeah, the safety car actually was a mistake the moment in which the safety car was deployed because we had that incident and then the race director waited a bit because we were in the middle of the pit window. So I think that he wanted all the cars to pit because then it would be a crazy situation with the safety car in the middle of the pit window. But he waited, but he deployed the safety car right in the end of the pit window. And then Felipe Massa was actually the guy that ended up ahead of the pack, which was nice because we all like Felipe and he was driving very well in the final part of the season. Already had won some podiums, and of course, the important race win at Interlagos was a nice way to finish the season. He now looks to a good 2024, trying to fight for the title for the first time in the Stock Car Pro Series. But we all know that in a normal situation, he probably wouldn't be fighting for the race win. And the nice thing, if we can say so, Alex, is that the guy that was en route to win the race was Rubens Barrichello, that is a gentleman, a good friend of Felipe. So he was able to enjoy that podium celebration with his old pal, and he wasn't complaining that much, even though we know that behind the scenes, Rubens wasn't happy with the safety car. But anyway, the good thing also is that the safety car didn't have an impact in the title fight because Daniel Serra was trying to climb the pack there. Gabriel Casagrande had a difficult moment in the second race of the back-to-back races that we had in the final round at Interlagos, but he was a very tactical driver in that moment, knowing that he had needed those points and seeing that Daniel Serra wasn't being able to overtake the drivers ahead. So It was, as always, by the way, a very emotional season finale for the Stock Car Pro Series. But the safety car, sorry, wasn't that nice. Even though, of course, seeing Felipe Massa winning after 15 years at Interlagos,
Yeah.
after a season in which those controversies about Singapore 2008 they came to light, it was nice to see. But anyway, we expect that the race direction will have better decisions in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, Casagrande did a fantastic job. I mean, I still remember when we were watching not just Cascavel when we saw Dudu Barrichello pick up his first win in his eighth race. And I still remember shouting out "Muito parabéns" on the commentary. Muito got clipped, and we got the parabéns at the end of it. But then, of course, we went to Buenos Aires where we saw even with the full 30 kilos of ballast. So for those wondering about the Stock Car Pro Series, the format is that you have your traditional free practice sessions, then you have the qualifying stages where it eliminate. So if you've got say 31 cars on the grid, 16 will go out in the first session, and then normally, I think if I remember correctly, Carlos, that they normally uh, alternate between the top 15 and the
Yes.
bottom 15 in the championship. So the top 15 out of the two group sessions in Q1 go into Q2, and then the six fastest drivers go for the pole position shootout. And I still remember, I think if I remember correctly, wasn't it Buenos Aires that Dudu Barrichello set exactly the same time as Gabriel Casagrange and nearly got into the top six shootout and was eliminated because Gabriel had set the lap first, if I remember correctly. So Dudu was that close to getting into Q3, but to see the amount of drivers that we had in Stock Car Pro Series for 2023, we had not just Rubinho, not just Gabriel, we had Daniel Serra, we had Rafael Suzuki, who was Mr. Consistency for Pole Motorsport. He's now made a switch. He's now gone to TMG. We've also heard that Nelson Piquet Jr. has gone over to Cavallero Sports, partnering with Gaetano Di Maro for 2024. And also, yeah, Daniel Serra and Ricardo Mauricio are re-signed to the same squad for 2024. So good consistency for the team there. Who are your real sort of standouts? I mean, to me, Suzuki was one of them. Zonta had some real good pace. Gaetano Di Maro, I think it was Gianluca Pentikov at Buenos Aires, being that close to getting his first pole position. A guy who'd raced in Freca the year before, came into Stock Car Pro Series, a bit like Dudu did as well, and it was their first full-time campaign. We really saw that there is a bit of a changing of the guard with the newer, hungrier, younger drivers coming through, with Dudu having a two-time champion, 2017 and 2022 champion Rubens Barrichello, his dad, alongside him as his teammate, was a good filter to have alongside because Rubens has been there before. He's fought for the title multiple times. Unfortunately, Brazil's Sterling Moss, Thiago Camilo, is always there or thereabouts, but never quite gets there. But I think we've got a real opportunity to see, like you say, Felipe Massa fighting for the title. I think we could see quite a few more changes in the driver season because a lot of drivers have yet to confirm that they're going to be in this series. We know that Tony Kanaan is going to be concentrating full time on his sporting role with Aaron McLaren in IndyCar. So he's said goodbye to full-time sports, after 3 seasons. Matias Rossi now moves back to Turismo Carretera, which is the Argentinian Touring Car Championship. And to see him get a win in the second race at Buenos Aires was a real treat for the pair of us to watch and see firsthand. But there could be a lot of changes on the forefront, couldn't there, for Stock Car Pro Series for 24?
Yeah, and it's an important season in terms of driver market because the following championship will have the introduction of the new cars, the SUV cars in the Stock Car Pro Series. So when you hire a driver now, you are also thinking about the development of the new car for the next season. It's in a way a similar situation to Formula One. If you sign a driver for 2025, then theoretically he will be very important in developing the car for 2026 with the new set of rules, especially in the engine side. But you talked about some of the movements of the driver market. I would highlight as well Rafael Suzuki going to TMG Racing as new teammate to Felipe Massa. So it's a new challenge to Felipe. He had his previous teammate, Julio Campos, that is a very experienced driver. This is not confirmed officially yet, Alex, but Campos will be driving in Pole Motorsport in the seat that used to belong to Rafael Suzuki. So a driver change between the two teams there. But Suzuki, as you said, Mr. Consistency last year. It's interesting to compare with his then teammate Attila Abreu that got 2 race wins, actually won the race number 600 of the Stock Car Pro Series history, but Attila wasn't that consistent. Sorry, Rafael Suzuki always there, bagging important points, some podiums here and there, and then fighting for the title until the very last round at Interlagos. Eventually, he wasn't able to win the title, which was the most likely situation because he was a bit behind Gabriel Casagrande and Daniel Serra. But it will be nice to see this driver lineup in TMG Racing. Felipe Massa and Rafael Suzuki. As you said, Nelsinho Piquet, as we call here in Brazil, Nelsinho, not Nelson Piquet Jr.,
Yeah.
going to the Cavaleiro Sports team. An interesting movement from Nelsinho because Cavaleiro Sports team is a bit, I would say, inconsistent. They had Marcos Gomes, the 2015 champion, in the team, and Denis Navarro now, all new driver lineup with Nelsinho Piquet and Gaetano de Mauro. Gaetano de Mauro, one of the most interesting youngsters of this series for quite a while, I would say, back from his full-time sports days in 2019. He used to be Rubens' teammate, and then in the KDF sports team last year, racing for the Hot Car New Generation team, and now going to Cavaleiro Sports with a very big challenge ahead of him. That is Nelson Piquet, of course, the first Formula E champion, has won races in NASCAR, national NASCAR categories. But when we think about the driver market, the situation is interesting. But you mentioned 2 names that I would like to highlight as well, Alex, because especially Gianluca Petekov had a very good season. And I am very happy to say that because his first participations in the series weren't that good. And in the beginning of 2023, I had a chat with him talking about this because he is an accomplished driver in Europe, a FRECA champion, has raced in Formula 2 as well. We used to bet him to get a Formula One seat in the future, but eventually he corrected his route also because it's too expensive for a Brazilian to race in single seaters in junior categories in Europe. But then the first full-time season in the Stock Car Pro Series, you could see that he had the full dedication to the championship, and the results came, which was very important for Gianluca. Also to make sure that he had an important seat in a accomplished team that is full-time sports. And now it will be interesting to see him challenging Rubens, and Dudu is learning with both of these drivers because even though Gianluca is very young, of course he has something to teach to Eduardo. They are both young drivers, and Rubens, we don't have to talk that much about him. He was actually very unlucky in the penultimate round at Cascavel. He was actually sick in the event, so a bit sad to see the way that Rubens' season ended, but he has the conditions to fight for the title next year as well, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at, when Dudu won the race at race 2 at Cascavel, Rubens had that massive moment, broken back axle, spun out, collected Marcos Gomez, and Tony Kanaan got caught up in the crossfire. So yeah, I mean, I know for a fact that it doesn't matter how much older Rubinho Barrichello gets, he will be fired up to get that 3rd title. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Gabriel Casagrande will want to do it, Zonta will want to get a title, Camilo will want to get a title, Felipe Fraga, the youngest ever Stock Car Pro Series champion in its history, back in 2016, finished 5th on, I think it was 255 points at the end of it all. He was very much in contention, but when we got to Interlagos for the BRB Super Final, there's a very different air because they've worked to this point, and it's like that ultimate final hour where everything's tense, everyone's like going like they're trying to stay away from the media, they're trying to stay in the pit box, they're trying to keep calm, they're trying to keep cool. There was an air of anticipation, and then when it came down to the final race at Interlagos, there must have been an electric atmosphere in Interlagos like I think I've never experienced. And when I was watching it, despite the fact I'd been in Bahrain and Qatar because Rubinho and Dudu had been competing at the Rotax Grand Finals. Again, Rubinho had been in Masters, didn't have a good pre-final, ended up retiring in the final. Dudu didn't make it through into the top 36, unlike when he did in Portimao the previous year. But it was great to sort of like see them in the paddock and say to Rubens, "Hey, good to see you again," and I congratulated Dudu on his win on Cascavel, and I said, "I can't believe I commentated on," and he said, "Which stream?" And I went, "The English one," and he went, "Ah, brilliant." You know, so it's always nice to see. Rubens is the youthful paradigm of Brazilian motorsport. You know, he loves karting. I know for a fact that him, Fefu, and Dudu are going to be in Orlando for the next couple of weeks for the Rotax Winter Trophy to again try and qualify for Sarno, which will be the grand finals in 2024. But coming on to other series, you mentioned, of course, Porsche Cup Brazil, where we've seen a lot of the current Stock Car Pro Series drivers, three of which who are, one of the big families that we know of in Brazil, the Barrichello family. But then Porsche Cup Brazil is also very competitive, especially with the 992 Cup cars. Just what's the flavour over there when it comes to Porsche Cup racing in Brazil?
It's a very nice series, and I have to say that the way they organize the championship is very interesting because we have two series to be honest. The Porsche Endurance Series, that is the one that had the Barrichello family competing last year. We had the 500 kilometers race of Interlagos that you mentioned, but also a race in Argentina, Termas de Rio Hondo, if I'm not wrong, a 300 kilometers race apart from Goiânia. That is one of the most important tracks in Brazil, also with an endurance race. And then throughout the year, they have the sprint championship with the regular drivers, as we call in Brazil, and a lot of very accomplished drivers, such as Miguel Paludo, for example, a NASCAR Xfinity Series driver. He competes a couple of races in NASCAR, seven-time champion, actually, of Porsche Brazil, so a very accomplished one in this series. The series has been having serious races, sorry, for I believe 15 years already. So they are very well organized. We have to praise the job that is done by Denner Pires, that is the CEO of Porsche Cup Brazil, as we have to praise what Fernando Giulianetti, the CEO of Stock Car Brazil, is doing. Actually, the international side of both of the championship is very nice. We have this year in 2024 two trips in Porsche Brazil, in Portugal and Argentina, once more, Termas de Rio Hondo, that is the venue of the Argentinian Grand Prix of MotoGP, and Estoril as well in Portugal for Porsche Cup Brazil. In the Stock Car Pro Series, we have already the confirmation of Buenos Aires once more in the calendar, Alex, and maybe the first stock car race in Uruguay in the El Pinar track. So this still needs to be confirmed, but the situation seems to be very interesting when we think about the international side of both of the series, apart from NASCAR Brazil that we can talk right after Porsche Brazil. But a very well-organized series, as you said. We have the 992 Porsche cars in the Porsche Carrera Cup Championship. That is a format that is also used in other countries and Europe as well. And then the 991-2 cars in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Championship. That is the most I would say, democratic class of the series that receives new drivers, also female drivers that are kickstarting their careers in cars. That is the case of Antonella Bassani, that I think is worthy of a mention. Antonella was a two-time finalist of the FIA Girls on Track program, a very, very good driver, only 16 years old, if I'm not wrong, and already a champion of Porsche Sprint Challenge, and looking forward to compete in the Carrera Cup. So it's a category that is interesting because you have the regulars, drivers such as Miguel Paludo. You mentioned Enzo Elias, the former champion of Porsche Brazil, already racing the stock car. So they are also forming new drivers to the top series. And apart from the gentleman drivers in the Porsche Sprint Challenge Championship, they have also the new talents that are getting to the series. So it works very well, even though the calendar is not that big with 9 events, if I'm not wrong, but they are able to go abroad in Argentina, Portugal, and to organize a championship a year, I would say the whole season, with a good mix of sprint races, endurance races. They bring in big names such as Rubens Barrichello, Ricardo Zonta, Nelson Piquet Jr. in the endurance series, and that works very well, apart from the fact that they also are a support event to the Formula One Grand Prix. So from time to time, we have an all-star Porsche race with the likes of Felipe Drugovich, Caio Collet, the Brazilian drivers that are racing in Europe or abroad. Caio Collet now confirmed as a reserve driver for Nissan in Formula E, and let's see if he gets a seat in the next series as well.
Yeah, well, let's move on to Formula E briefly. Of course, Kyle Collette with Nissan E-Dams, who have the funny thing is that Sasha Fenestraz is trying to get his Argentinian nationality stamped on his car for this year, the number 23, partnered with Oliver Rowland. But of course, there is one man who has been a backbone of Formula E right from season one. Also picked up a title in season five, of course. It is none other than Lucas Di Grassi, who has again switched teams for the 10th anniversary season. He switched from what was, a good start to the year in season 9 at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City just 12 months ago. And then the season with Mahindra went downhill, and then he's rejoined a team that he won his title with at Cupra, joining Nico Müller. It's really good to see that Lucas has such a passion for sustainability within motorsport, but also was one of the big believers with Alejandro Agag, the creator of Formula E. It's really good to see that Formula E last season ventured to the streets of Sao Paulo for the very first time, and it continues to do so in season 10. How enthused are the Brazilian fans over in your neck of the woods with regards to Formula E coming into the streets of Sao Paulo?
It's interesting that you mentioned the São Paulo E-Prix. Actually, in 2 months, we'll have the second edition of the race, so a good expectation for us journalists, but for the fans as well. We had a lot of fans attending the Sambadrome IMB, as we call here in Brazil. That is the venue in which we have carnival celebrations and so on. And they were able to do an interesting track there. Of course, there are limitations in the layout because we have a very big avenue to the side of the Sambadrome, and then to the other side we have the neighborhood there. But the track was interesting, even though the event wasn't that well organized. We had some fans complaining about the stands, of course. The situation regarding buying food, water, and so on was a bit tricky, but I know already that they have changed something in the organization of the event, so we can expect better things. And we see that the motorsport fans embrace the event, even the most traditional ones that eventually are not too into Formula E because it's an electric car and so on. They are learning to like this new way of racing, and it's interesting that you mentioned Lucas Di Grassi, because in Rubens Barrichello, we have a guy that is passionate about motorsport as a whole. He likes everything. In his 50s, racing in the Stock Car Pro Series, Porsche Endurance Series, karting, as you said. A couple of years ago, he was racing in the S5000 series in Australia.
Yeah.
So back to the single seaters. It was very nice to see. And it's amazing how Rubens likes the thing, you know. Maybe with his age, I would be already trying to focus on my kids' careers and, of course, not having that racing duty every single weekend. That is not the case in the Stock Car Pro Series, so I think that's one of the things that allow him to be top driver still. But Lucas Di Grassi is also passionate about motorsport, but in a different way. He likes the idea behind the Formula E championship, and he's an ambassador of the series actually from before the beginning of the series. So that's why Alejandro Agag recognizes his effort, his contribution to Formula E. And actually, we had an episode of Formula E, Unplugged, the sort of Drive to Survive series of Formula E, recently being released, and that's a recognition, of Lucas Di Grassi's work as an ambassador, as a driver as well, because he's one of the top drivers of the series. Of course, Mahindra wasn't that competitive last year. Now, at Cupra trying to find their way to be competitive. It was a difficult round, not just for Lucas, but also for Sergio Sete Câmara, the Brazilian driver of now the ERT team, the Neo team that was rebranded. But Lucas still has a lot to give to the series, I believe. And I think that he knows that, because otherwise he would be racing maybe in the World Endurance Championship, because he has a good relationship with the teams there. He used to race for Audi in the WEC, and actually will have the World Endurance Championship back to Brazil this year. A good expectation for the 6 hours of São Paulo, by the way. But Lucas is a very special character. We had the opportunity to talk with him about the new generation of cars, the beginning of last year with the Formula E, São Paulo Prix. And now next season another car. So you see that the guy will go to the 5th generation of cars in the same category that he helped to found. So it will be nice to see. And Sasha Fenestraz, indeed, he told us this Argentinian issue last year. Let's see what he's able to do, because so far he's still a French driver in Formula E.
Yeah, I had the opportunity of briefly catching up with Sergio Sette Camara, funnily enough, at the Berlin E-Prix, because last year I had the honour of actually being the German-speaking circuit commentator, and I walked in the paddock in the morning, and I said, "Great qualifying. What are you hoping for today?" He said, "Hopefully some points, and it's great to see." Sergio Sette Camara, like a lot of Brazilian drivers, have tried to make their way up through the single-seater pathway to get to Formula One. Of course, Felipe Drugovich, for another year, is still the Aston Martin Formula One reserve and test driver at the moment. But it's really good to see that along with Lucas, we've got Sergio in there. So we've got a double hit of Brazilian passion and enthusiasm for the category. And I'm really hoping that ERT are able to consolidate what form they had last year and maybe have a bit of a chance to punch a little bit more above their weight. I mean, the big news earlier on when we had the Mexico E-Prix that at Cupra have now decided that at the end of this season they're not going to be using Mahindra powertrains anymore because of obviously different whether it was differences of opinion. But you know what, I'm hoping that Lucas and Nico and all the team at Kempton for Ad Cupra have an opportunity, whether this might give the opportunity for Cupra to enter as a manufacturer. Of course, we know that when Lucas won his title, it was with Audi Sport Ab Schiffler, and at that time, a former World Endurance Championship alumni was part of the team, Alan McNish. But yeah, I think coming on to let's go back to Stock Car Pro Series. Obviously, Mr. Giacomelli unveiled the 2025 stock cars at a press conference where we saw what Chevrolet and Toyota are going to bring. But then, interesting that we've now got the possibility of another two manufacturers joining the Stock Car Pro Series grid for 2025. Of course, lower displacement. We go from a 6.8 litre V8 naturally aspirated to an inline 4-cylinder turbocharged engine with a lot more advancements through Vicar and all the work that all the respective partners with Giacomelli and everybody at Stock Car Pro Series. I was actually really surprised about how they looked, and I thought, actually, that's not a bad thing because they are very representative of the cars in the current Brazilian automotive market, aren't they?
Wrong buttons, sorry, but that's it. They are representative of the market that we have in Brazil, not just in Brazil, but in the region as a whole. And actually, if you look to the cars as they were unveiled in renders and so on by Fernando Giulianelli, they are actually quite sexy. It doesn't look like a traditional SUV car. So I was a bit afraid in the first moment, Alex, I have to say that. But if you look to the Corolla Cross model of Toyota and the Tracker model of Chevrolet, they look a little bit more like a hatchback or a station wagon car in an aggressive manner because they are close to the ground. They have some of the parts that are standard for both of the cars, and then the other two manufacturers that will come to the Stock Car Pro Series. One of them, as far as I know, is set to be the Fiat brand with the Stellantis company behind it. So let's wait if there is confirmation of that and if there's an indication of the fourth manufacturer. But I like the cars. The concept behind the idea of bringing the SUVs to stock car is correct because the market share in the automotive business in Brazil, when we think about the SUVs, is very big. The sedan cars aren't sold as much as they were back in the 70s, the 80s, when the stock car series was born. So it makes sense. It was also, in a way, a request by the manufacturers, the current ones, but the ones that are entering the series. Of course, the CEO of Stock Car Pro Series knows the manufacturers that are coming to the championship. He cannot announce, but it's in line with the market, and Stock Car has always had this relationship with the manufacturers in the Brazilian market, and that's why Chevrolet, that is a very big company in Brazil, GM, they are still with stock cars for 40 years on. So it makes sense. The cars weren't that scary as I thought they would be in the first
Mm.
moment when I heard, oh my God, SUV cars in the Stock Car Pro Series. That doesn't make sense. But no, they look sexy. I think they will be competitive. And the most important thing is that they give us good racing and competitiveness. Because when we had the change of the spec of cars between 2019 and 2020, we were also concerned about that because Stock Car Pro Series with the old bubble cars, the series was very very competitive, and it's still very competitive. And actually, the fight between the two manufacturers that we have in this moment, Chevrolet and Toyota, it gives an extra emotion in the championship. Now we'll have two more manufacturers. The car looks nice, and I have to say that I trust the work that is being done with the partners, the engine supplier. The gearbox is made by the company that does the gearbox for IndyCar. The steel of the cars is made by one of the most important steel companies, that is ArcelorMittal. So the car will be interesting to see in terms of aesthetics, and of course technology will be a factor, because these cars that we had in the Stock Car Pro Series, they were already outdated in terms of technology. So that's an important movement by the series. Of course, it costs a lot, so the teams will have to be very intelligent with the budget management, but
Hmm.
that's part of racing, not just in the stock cars, but Formula One and so on.
Yeah, I mean, with when I actually watched the press conference with Fernando Giulianelli, I've been getting his name all wrong in this podcast. So Fernando, sorry, sorry, my sincerest apologies. It does happen, but the it kind of reminds me of the Super Touring Volvo 850 estates that were in the British Touring Car Championship. That's what it kind of reminds me of. And I was like, I looked and I went, they really do look very, very, nice stance, aggressive. But then also when you saw, the Chevrolet and the Toyota put side by side in a sort of like a comparison, excuse me, on how they're trying to make the cars very, very similar in terms of aerodynamics, enabling the cars to be very competitive, as you said, Carlos. It really does provide exciting times, especially with the cars being 5G connected as well. So there's going to be a lot more that the fans are going to be able to access, like say in-car cameras. And also it's going to help the teams as well, because Snapdragon, we know, has been a long time partner of the series. Also it gives the pole position trophy away for every single round of the Stock Car Pro Series, and also for the a representative of the winning team for each race. That's going to be really good, because the telemetry and all the data that the drivers and the teams will be able to look over with these new cars come 2025 will be very, very quick to access in comparison to the current technology that we have with these stock cars that we'll only see for one more generation. Of course, Fernando Giulianelli was saying that we will actually be demonstrating these new cars in person at circuits throughout the 2024 season. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what they look like, what they sound like, because we know what a naturally aspirated V8 sounds like when we have 29, 30 of them side by side when the lights go out and they hurtle down into turn one, especially coming down to Baciao at Cascavel, for instance. It's going to be a very, very different a new era for stock cars, and I'm really, really excited about that. But also, we lost someone from the Brazilian motorsport family just before the new year. Someone who was a great person, great advocate of Brazilian motorsport, of course, Gil de Ferran. We lost just a couple of days before 2024, and 2000 and 2001, Champ Car champion with Team Penske, very, very much intertwined with the McLaren family, especially in the latter stages of his career. A big personality of Brazilian motorsport, unfortunately, Carlos, that we have lost.
Yeah, that was very sad, and young, very young, still 56 years old. So it was something that we didn't see coming and in a strange circumstance. He was racing with his friends in the US, and then he had the heart attack, and then of course they weren't able to save his life. And it's it's a bit scary to see how things can change from one time to another. We have now Wilson Fittipaldi Jr. also in the hospital because he had an issue swallowing a piece of meat in his anniversary, and now in a difficult situation. But Gil de Ferran is definitely a legend of the sport. I had the opportunity to interview him in the 2019 Brazilian Grand Prix as a sporting director of McLaren, as you said. A very intelligent guy, and it's interesting how he transcends the American motorsport because he got out of Brazil to pursue his career in motorsport very young, had an interesting start of his international journey in Europe, then some eventful Formula One tests, hitting his head once, and then losing the opportunity to get a seat in Formula One, but then reshuffling his career to the US in a very successful manner. As you said, a very intelligent driver, and that's interesting how even his rivals, they acknowledge that, because Gil de Ferran was definitely a different guy, not the regular driver. We talked about Lucas de Grassi, how intelligent he is, how important he is as an ambassador of Formula E. I would say that Gil de Ferran is an ambassador of motorsport as a whole, and that's why he transcends IndyCar. He has an important had an important career in Formula One, especially with McLaren, but not just McLaren. He used to work for other teams as a manager as well. And in Brazil, always very respected because from time to time he used to be in a stock car paddock, for example. He has never raced in the Stock Car Pro Series, but everyone stopped to say, hello, you are the guy. Gil de Ferran is definitely a legend, and that's sad to see. But the good thing is that we see that the recognition comes. And even though he died very young, as I said, only 56 years old, we can see that in the US, he has a recognition from his Brazilian rivals and friends such as Hélio Castro Neves, TK as well. He has a recognition, and the international motorsport community as a whole. And I think that's fair to say the least, because he was definitely a different character, I would say, not just because of what he used to do on the track, but also out of the track and as a friend as well. We have a lot of reports of our sources here in Motorsport Brazil that he was a very nice guy, independently of what happened in motorsport, in McLaren, in IndyCar, or whatever. So a nice guy to be with, and a very intelligent one. So that's definitely a big loss for motorsport, not just Brazilians, but for the international community as a whole. Alex.
Yeah, I think also one of the nicest tributes that we saw just before the Mexico E-Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Neil McLaren, both drivers, Sam Bird and Jake Hughes, had Gil de Ferran on the visors of their helmets. They had Gilles' name on the cars, on every bit of signage they could put it on.
And he helped Formula E as well.
Exactly.
So the guy was everywhere: IndyCar, Formula One, Formula E. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So Neil McLaren, thumbs up from me on that one. I think really, your role, obviously, as having initially been a freelance journalist, you qualified through your studies in Brazil. What's the best thing you love about commentating?
I think when I have the opportunity to commentate on international broadcasts, such as the case of the Stock Car Pro Series and Porsche Cup Brazil in Motorsport TV, the nice thing is to bring to international audiences the information that we have in Brazil and the culture that we have in motorsport here, because it's a very unique country in that matter, not just because we have Formula One champions, IndyCar legends such as Gil de Ferran, Hélio Castro Neves, and TK, but we have a very united community in terms of motorsport drivers, team principals here in Brazil, the organization of the racing series. We mentioned it, the Stock Car and Porsche Cup. We have also NASCAR Brazil, also Endurance Brazil, that is one of the most important racing series. We see that there is an integration of the organizers in order to have an interesting calendar. So to bring this view of us Brazilians, especially a young journalist like myself, to international audiences, it's nice. And apart from that, to translate a bit how the regulations of the Stock Car Pro Series work, because it's a bit crazy.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
looks,
I found that out when we first worked with each other at round 4 of the season at Cascavel. I mean, the thing
yeah,
was is that it was when I was I was always trying to remember certain things that Carlos was telling me, like say Thiago Camilo, Brazil's equivalent of Sterling Moss, and then we go to Buenos Aires, and then then I said, who is it you said is a bit like Sterling Moss? And then I went on to say that yeah, Sterling Moss was the first ever lap record holder at the Autodromo Oscar y Juan Galvez back in the 1950s, running a Cooper F1 car. So it's quite interesting that you can put a different spin on it. Now, Carlos, I just got a final couple of questions, really. As we've talked quite a lot about Brazilian motorsport, of course, we've talked about Giro de France, we've talked about Formula E, Stock Car Pro Series, Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil. Who were your inspirations growing up as a young man when you got bitten by the motorsport bug?
yeah, different inspirations because you have drivers as inspirations, also managers, journalists. We have in Brazil Reginaldo Leme, that is one of the most important Formula One journalists, has been covering Formula One since the 70s,
Mhm.
to the Estadão newspaper, that, by the way, is the newspaper in which I started my professional career. Then he went to Globo, that is the most important broadcast company in Brazil, now in the Band company that is the rights holder of Formula One in our country. So a very experienced journalist, and was always known because he respects the drivers a lot. And then because of that, the drivers respected him too much. And he had a particular relationship with Nelson Piquet that, as even people from abroad know, is a very difficult character. So
Yeah,
to build this relationship with a source, I think Reginaldo Leme is definitely an inspiration. Also, Claudio Carsugi, that is actually Italian, but he came to Brazil very young and has been covering Formula One since the very first season. So the guy knows a lot about the sport. Also, Dito Cavalcante, a lot of experienced journalists in Brazil. In terms of drivers, I like to analyze a bit the character of the driver. We have the ruthless Max Verstappen. We have the passionate Rubens Barrichello, as we are seeing, especially now in the Stock Car Pro Series, because he's already in his 50s. So I try to get a bit of this character traits of particular drivers. I think Max is inspirational. Rubens as well, Michael Schumacher, because of the dedication he had to a project with Ferrari. Of course, Michael had some controversial moments, especially for us
yeah,
Brazilians. To talk about Michael being a Rubens fan is a bit complicated, but Michael is, I believe, the greatest. Lewis is also a very important inspiration because of what he brings to the sport apart from the racing things. So representation and, of course, having this concern about things that go that transcend motorsport as a whole. And now, as a Brazilian citizen, it is funny to see him coming to our country. He was actually at Bahia for the New Year celebrations here in Brazil. Max also with the Piquet family. So I try to get this personality traits from particular drivers and to, of course, translate that into the work as a journalist, because I am not in the car racing, but I can try to build a good relationship with a source. I can try to study the regulations of such a complicated series
yeah.
that is Stock Car Pro, especially because it changes the regulations quite frequently, and to be up to date with things that are happening, not just in the categories that I am specialized in, such as Stock Car, Porsche Cup, and NASCAR Brazil. I like to mention NASCAR Brazil because it just shows how important to have big names such as NASCAR in our market is, because it also makes that stock car brings a new car, new technology to the series in order to have this whole market growing together. And NASCAR in Brazil is an important thing that we had last year. And apart from that, My father used to be a rally driver, of course, a gentleman driver, but rally driver in Brazil in the 70s and the 80s. So it comes from the family, and eventually I got to be a motorsport journalist. I like sports as a whole: football, tennis, basketball, boxing. But I always knew that eventually it would be very likely to work as a motorsport journalist, Alex. And it has been a nice journey so far.
Yeah, I think one of the more interesting characters from Brazilian motorsport who actually really inspired me to follow my passion of motorsport is a name that a lot of people will be very familiar with the late 1980s and the early 1990s. Of course, Ayrton Senna da Silva, three-time Formula One world champion. Because I've been a big fan. He was the when I saw the 1988 Monte Carlo Grand Prix when he was having that big rivalry with Alain Prost with the MP44, and then Monte Carlo. The way he danced with that car, it was like a Brazilian samba, and it just literally got me into. I was just like thinking, what is this? And from then on until Ayrton's tragic passing at the San Marino Grand Prix on May 1st, 1994. I was always following wherever Ayrton was going. I still remember his opening lap at the European Grand Prix at Donington Park in the wets in the underpowered Peugeot McLaren. And for those that wonder what kind of memorabilia I actually have at home, a few years ago, I came back home. I went to see my mum and dad, very, very close to my family here in the UK. And he said, "Go and have a look at the stairs." And I went, "That's a helmet bag." And he went, "Yeah, just open it." I opened it up, folks, and no word of a lie. It was a replica of the same crash helmet of Ayrton in 1994. With the Brazilian flag colours, with the Nacional sticker on the front, with all the relevant sponsors for Williams that year, and that now sits pride of place in a polyurethane box, and that is staying in that box forever. And I'll be completely honest with you, folks. I don't get emotional about many things, but that one thing made me cry my eyes out. My eyes were literally red and dry by the time I'd realised what I had in my hands. And Dad said, "Put it on." Yeah. Oh yeah, you've muted yourself there, Carlos. Yeah. It was an emotional moment, and it's one I'll never forget. He even told me to try the race helmet on, and I did, and I went, "That's the only time that's going on my head, and that is staying in the box." So there's I've got a love for Brazilian motorsport. So Carlos, thank you so much for jumping on the show. Muito obrigado.
Ah, I thank you, Alex. I muted myself because I was emotional with the account that you made. Of course, this replica of such a difficult moment for Ayrton and his whole fans. It's interesting to see how he transcends Brazil as well. Mentioned Nelson Piquet, Rubens, they are very important in our country, but Ayrton transcends that. And of course, due to the things that happened and the San Marino Grand Prix, as you said, it's always difficult to talk about him. I had the opportunity to interview Bruno Senna, Viviane Senna, his sister, and the whole family actually recently because they had an initiative ahead of the São Paulo Grand Prix last year. So it's always difficult. I'm sorry that I was muted, but I was emotional because of the story you told us. I imagine what you felt when you opened the helmet case there, and it was
Yeah.
there the representation, the maximum representation of Ayrton, I would say, Alex. And thank you for the opportunity to be on the podcast. It was very nice.
So, folks, that wraps it up for episode number 49, our Brazilian and South American edition. But episode 50 is around the next apex. So, from myself and Carlos, it's goodbye for now.
Bye bye.